Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, John Harrington, back to hit with another video. And just like yesterday, today we are going to be doing a recap edition of Heroes of the Morphing Grid. Now, if you've been following along from the very beginning when we first started with What If Deku Was a Power Ranger, this is a series that I have been cultivating for a while now. Again, just like the Marvel anime universe, I wasn't necessarily thinking about making a multiverse in the beginning, at least not to the extent that I did. I was originally only going to use My Hero Academia, but then everyone kept giving me other ideas and feedbacks, and I'm not gonna lie, to an extent I kind of pushed against doing some of them at first, mainly because I wasn't sure of how I was going to make it work. For example, with Naruto Power Rangers Ninja Storm, I wasn't sure how I would get the series to work and function in a proper way, because if we're being entirely honest, Naruto with Power Ranger abilities really doesn't make all that much sense, but I think I found a good balance of story where I had villains strong enough for a Naruto Ranger team to fight, and also a group of villains that weren't too overpowering. Now, I did use the MCU method and created a few variant characters, if you will. And essentially what variants are they're different versions of mainstay characters. So you have different versions of Power Ranger characters that exist specifically in a universe for a particular story. But in this overview, I'm mainly just going to try to briefly explain all 7 Power Ranger stories, how they connect, and everything you need to know as we go into our main crossover event storyline. So to begin, we start with where this series takes place. We follow the original storyline of the Power Rangers Shattered Grid event. In this story, we have a version of Tommy Oliver, the Green Ranger, who ended up turning to the dark side. Aligning himself with Rita Repulsa, he took the powers of the White Tiger coin along with the Dragon coin, combined them together, and became Lord Dragon. He destroyed his universe's Power Rangers and ended up conquering his world. But he wanted to go beyond that. So he ends up killing Rita Repulsa, taking over and becoming a dictator, and now he hops across multiverse to multiverse, hunting down and destroying Rangers or recruiting them to his side as he tries to reach his goal of becoming a god. So for me, this version of Lord Draken, his main motivation is finding the center of the Morphing Grid. The reason for that is that if he can find the center of the Morphing Grid, he will be able to tap into an unlimited resource of power. The power that fuels all of the Rangers across every timeline, everything else, it all comes from one morphing grid. There is no multiple morphing grids or a morphing grid in each universe. Think of something akin to the Living Tribunal from Marvel. Even though you have a lot of different universes, in the end of the day, there's only one Living Tribunal who reigns over all. So there's only one morphing grid, and Lord Draken wants to find it, but also he wants to conquer different universe Rangers in any way that he can. And there are some universes that are different from the main Power Ranger universe. And when I say the main Power Ranger universe, I mean the main Power Ranger universe that we watch on television, from Mighty Morphin all the way till now. That is the main universe, and that is the main universe that I have not used up until this point. Every other universe is different in its own way. So let's start with our first story, the My Hero Academia What If Deku Was a Power Ranger. Now, the story starts in the alternate universe where Lord Draken had taken over and he had pretty much become the ruler of his world. He was in the midst of his conquest attempting to defeat the remaining resistance, which was made up of former Rangers from the Mighty Morphin team like Jason, Billy, Trini, Zack, and the like. They led a resistance force to Lord Draken's base, attempting to steal the Ranger powers back to try to fight against Lord Draken. Lord Draken has a secret chamber, a chamber where he keeps all of the morphers, all of the powers, everything that he's managed to take from various universes. The team ended up finding this chamber, and they also found a broken Alpha. After restoring him, Billy gives Alpha 7 power coins. These are power coins that have been taken and power coins that were never used. So you have all 7 Mighty Morphin power coins. Along with that, Alpha has data on the alien ranger powers, including Ninjor, and that will play a key role in the future of this story. So while they're breaking into the base, Lord Draken ends up finding them, and the Rangers and Billy, they decide to make the sacrifice to hold him off while they send Alpha away. Alpha escapes through a portal and leaves, while the team that stays back, unfortunately, are killed by Lord Draken one by one. Alpha is then sent to the My Hero Academia universe, but he lands there 5 years before the start of the original series. He lands in a cave in a beach near where Izuku Midoriya lives. Now, Izuku by this time knows that he is quirkless, and one day while he and Bakugo and both of their mothers are at the beach, Izuku and Bakugo as children find the broken Alpha inside of the cave, but because they're scared of it, they end up running away and not getting too close. However, a few years later, Izuku and Bakugo end up going back to the cave where they reactivate Alpha. Alpha learns that he is in another universe, and he learns about the world that he is in from both Bakugo and from Izuku. Now, seeing their kind-hearted nature and being able to read their intent, he offers them the chance to become Rangers and to help him in his fight, and the two of them take it. Bakugo becomes the Red Ranger, and Izuku becomes the Green Ranger. Now, one thing that I did for the My Hero Academia universe when it comes to Ranger power is that if you become a Power Ranger in the My Hero Academia universe and you are quirkless, the morphing grid affects a quirkless body in the following way. I've decided to treat having a quirk or having a quirkless body as akin to having a recessive gene. That is, unless your quirk was stolen by All For One. But for Izuku, I just say that Izuku's quirk was recessive. So think of Izuku basically using his morpher. The morpher acts like a jump start, like you would use a jump start to a car that needs a spark. It basically sparks your DNA, so it turns your recessive gene into a dominant gene. So when this happens, Izuku's quirk that he would have gotten if it wasn't recessive, it becomes active, giving Izuku a quirk. And that quirk is Green Flame. Now, Green Flame, Izuku, he's basically able to use green fire, but his fire abilities work very similar to that of a firebender from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So basically everything that Zuko could do, pretty much Izuku can do it as well. On top of having ranger powers. They're also able to summon Megazords that are stored away in another dimension, but they don't do it unless it's absolutely necessary because they have to learn how to drive them, so on and so on. So Izuku and Bakugo pretty much become the Green and Red Ranger, and slowly throughout the series, other Rangers are recruited. Todoroki becomes the Black Ranger, Ida becomes the Blue Ranger, Uraraka becomes the Pink Ranger, Momo becomes the Yellow Ranger, Melissa Shields from the My Hero Academia movie, Two Heroes, she becomes the White Ranger, and because she was quirkless, her quirk is Jump Started. Her father has the ability to stretch his fingers, so for her, I gave her the quirk Elasticity. So basically, think of anything that Elastigirl can do from The Incredibles, Melissa can do that now, and she's the White Ranger. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The story of My Hero Academia pretty much plays out as it does in the original, only now we have the 7 students from Class 1A being Power Rangers. Mr. Aizawa, who, along with the other staff at UA and All Might, who learn about Alpha and what the Power Rangers are, try to help them in any way that they can. For a short period of time, Mr. Aizawa was actually able to become Ninjor. Although it wouldn't be in an armored form, he would be Ninjor in a much more slender, Ranger-like suit form. And he was using this power to learn how to activate it, to learn how to be a Ranger, and to help provide any training to the other Rangers that they might need. Eventually, they are able to make copies of the alien Ranger powers, basically the alien Rangers or the alien Ninja Rangers, and they select students from Class 1B to become the alien Ninja Rangers. Among them, you have Shinzo, who is given the Ninja powers from Mr. Aizawa, since Mr. Aizawa would be training Shinzo. After this, we do cover all 5 seasons of My Hero Academia, and at the end of the season 5 portion of the story, which would basically be part 12, that's when Izuku, Todoroki, and Bakugo get a distress signal from the Time Force telling them of Lord Draken and his conquest, so they are offered the chance to go on an adventure and basically recruit the other Rangers from my series. So that's why at the end of every other Power Ranger series that I make, that's why Izuku, Todoroki, and Bakugo end up showing up, because they're trying to recruit different Rangers to help them. However, while they were recruiting all of them, something happened that ended up pulling all of my teams together. But I'll explain that a little bit later. But for right now, let's get into the second story, which was the Neon Genesis Evangelion crossover Power Ranger Zeo, the Star of Hope. Now, the reason for the crossover between Neon Genesis Evangelion and Power Ranger Zeo is because at the time, I had actually watched Neon Genesis Evangelion for the first time. I actually first watched it last summer, to be more specific, and I fell in love with this series. I mean, I thought the story, the concepts, everything into it, it was a really fun show, even though the last few episodes are a bit of a mind trip, to say the least, and I would say the end of Evangelion is extremely depressing. All in all, I really do love Neon Genesis Evangelion, and even though I'm super late to the party, I can easily say it's one of my all-time favorite animes, and it's not even close. That's why I want to do more what-ifs and more different stories with Neon Genesis, because I really feel like there are a lot of unique and different type of things you can tell. But anyway, with this series, how it starts is that Lord Draken is basically sending his different forces to attack different universes for him. You see, the thing about Lord Draken is because he's so busy with his conquest, he can't personally go from universe to universe all the time. So what Lord Draken has done is he recruits different villains from various Ranger teams, and he basically puts them under his bidding, and he sends them to do his dirty work. Among them, he ends up getting the generals from the Forever Red story, if you're familiar with that. They're basically the big bad Beetleborgs that were used as the generals, the 5 generals. He sends them to a universe with the Zeo Power Rangers. Basically, the year would have been 1995, and they would have only gotten up to Zeo at that point. And he basically sends them there to attack the Zeo Rangers. At the time, you would have the Zeo Ranger team, that would be the same as the original, with the Gold Ranger being a younger Jason. The team is attacked by the Borg generals along with an army of cogs, and the Zeo Ranger team is wiped out. Everyone except for Jason. Jason is sent off in Pyramidas to escape Earth with the Zeo powers so that the generals cannot get their hands on them, because they're trying to get all of the Zeo Zords in order to reform the Zeo Crystal, which is one of the most powerful artifacts in all of Power Rangers. A power that can only get stronger as time goes on. That's why you have the theme song Stronger Than Before. So this version of Jason leaves with Pyramidas and is basically flying through space trying to get away from the generals. While they're flying in space, a wormhole opens and it basically takes Jason and the generals into the Evangelion universe. And when Jason arrives to Earth, he arrives during the events of the first episode. As a matter of fact, while the generals end up crashing on the moon, Pyramidas ends up landing in Tokyo 3, in the middle of Shinji's first fight against the Angel. However, this is before Shinji is traumatized by having the head of his Eva be crushed with a spear, basically having his head stabbed through and feeling that. So Jason, using the strength that he has left with Pyramidas, he ends up transforming it into its Megazord form, and he helps destroy the Angel and save Shinji's life. Now, because of this causes a split, and Shinji starts to experience what I call a time lapse. Now, the explanation for this time lapse is that Shinji is basically able to see visions of an alternate timeline. And this timeline is a universe that's pretty much the original Evangelion story, except every time he sees it, he sees a version of himself that embodies everything he does not want to be. That's why the series is called The Star of Hope, because Shinji, in my universe, is rejecting being weak. He's rejecting being frail. Instead of giving in to despair, he overcomes the anxieties that are before him. And that's why throughout the series, at every point in the story, whenever Shinji overcomes an obstacle, he sees a vision from the universe that's parallel to his own. A universe where Shinji was not brave, where Shinji did not have strong qualities, where Shinji gave in to fear. But instead, he rejects that dark part of himself. In the end, Jason ends up explaining his situation to the people of Nerve, Gendo Ikari not trusting Jason but still wanting to use his help. He allows for Shinji and the others to become Zeo Rangers to fight against the Cog attacks and to fight against the Angels. In the process, they also help rebuild the Zeozords with the data that they were able to get from Jason. And in this universe, Jason ends up forming a relationship with Misato as well. You could say that Jason in this universe serves as a mentor more than anything, but what he really serves is as a good father figure for Shinji, because if you know Evangelion, then you know that Gendo wasn't much of a father to Shinji at all. But in this universe, he has a father figure in Jason who helps him, who encourages him to be better. You know, instead of Gendo, who is always putting Shinji down, you have Jason, who is trying to lift him up, to make him a better person. And Jason serves as an example that even though life knocks you down, you can still get back up and you can still keep fighting. And that's what Shinji takes from Jason. And we see that throughout the course of the story. Shinji has a better relationship with Asuka because he's not always cowering in fear. He's able to reach out to Rei and help her see that she too is a human and not just a cog in his father's plans. We even see Kensuke and Toji. They end up becoming Rangers as well. Kensuke becomes the blue Zeo Ranger. Toji becomes the green Zeo Ranger because I believe he has a lot of Atom in him. And Jason leads the team as the Gold Ranger. And this eventually leads to the final battle between the generals and between the Zeo Rangers. The generals end up launching a last-ditch effort where they end up destroying Sele before they can attack. And they end up attacking with like an army of Evas themselves, trying to cause third impact and steal the power of God for themselves, because the generals, they don't like working under Lord Draken. So if they can get this power, they plan on returning and trying to betray their master. However, they are defeated by the Zeo Rangers, and at the end of the series, Misato does get married to Jason, and they live happily ever after as they watch over the Zeo Rangers. Now, before we get to the end, I did do a special movie that was kind of a tribute to the end of Evangelion. So I used that for a special movie for this series. And basically what happens is that you have an evil Shinji from another timeline who is very unhappy that he had to go through all this suffering. And he ends up coming to this universe to get revenge against the good Shinji. And that's basically how that fight takes place. It's an evil Shinji versus a good Shinji, because the two of them, they walk down different paths. Ultimately, the good Shinji wins, the Zeo Rangers win, and that's the culmination of the story. After this, while the 5 Zeo Rangers are all at school, we would see Izuku, we see Bakugo, and we see Todoroki. They end up arriving through a portal, and this is the first crossover that we see between the two Ranger teams. Jason arrives not too long after, and he sees Bakugo in his old Red Ranger suit, and he asks them where they got the powers from. And Shinji basically explains to them what's going on, and they tell them about the coming of Lord Draken and that they need to find allies. So that covers the Evangelion Star of Hope portion of this series. But then what would come next after that is we would have Fire Force Lightspeed Rescue. Now, Fire Force Lightspeed Rescue, this was just a crossover that ultimately made a lot of sense. You have the two different teams that are very similar to one another. Fire Force, they have a Power Rangers firefighter type of motif. And then you have Fire Force themselves and their storyline. So they cross over pretty good together. The story in and of itself is rather simple. In this Fire Force universe, there was a version of the Lightspeed Rescue Power Rangers. And before the great cataclysm that destroyed the world, the Rangers were in a fight against Diabolico. And Diabolico is basically connected to the Evangelist. And Diabolico has something to do with the Great Cataclysm, or the Great Destruction of Flame that ended up destroying the Earth. However, before their destruction, the powers of the Lightspeed Rangers were entrusted to Vulcan's family. And Vulcan's family kept the power hidden up until the time when Vulcan felt that they were going to need the power and all that they could get if they were going to fight against the White Clad. So after Vulcan joins the Fire Force, which is where my story begins in this timeline, Vulcan basically uncovers the Lightspeed Rescue powers, and he ends up reactivating them, all 6, and he gives them to the members of Company 8. Shinra becomes the Red Ranger, and their captain, Captain Obi, he becomes the Titanium Ranger, because the Titanium powers were said to be the strongest. But because Captain Obi is a first generation and he's human and he has no powers at all compared to the others, him having the titanium power evens everything out. Now, for the most part, the story remains rather continuative to what happens in the original Fire Force, although now they have Power Ranger powers that can amplify them in combat. Also, because of the extra power, a few things turn out a bit different. For one, they're able to reverse engineer some of the morphers, and they're able to make a few extra powers. So Princess Hibana, she becomes the Purple Lightspeed Ranger. You have Cole from the first company, who's able to use the power to turn fire into ice. He ends up becoming a Lightspeed Ranger himself, the White Ranger. You then have Tokomo, who is the captain of Company 7. He ends up becoming the Black Lightspeed Ranger as well. And then you have Ogon and you have Inka. In this timeline, Inka, she doesn't join the White Clad. She instead joins the Fire Force, because using her power to see fire before it happens, she basically sees a great fire that's going to come from Shinra one day. And because she wants to see what's going to happen with him, she decides to follow him close. She becomes the Orange Lightspeed Ranger, And then you have Ogon, he becomes the turquoise Lightspeed Ranger as well. And by the end of this series, you have Izuku who arrives with his team, and he basically recruits some of the Lightspeed Rangers to come fight with him. However, because they can't afford to send everyone, Captain Obi decides to send 5 Lightspeed Rangers to help Izuku on his journey. He sends Shinra, he sends Tomaki, he sends Arthur, he sends Inka, and he sends Ogon. And those are the 5 that end up going with Izuku. However, at the end of Lightspeed Rescue, this is when the big crossover before the crossover takes place. A portal opens because there is a strong emotion pulling the Rangers to a certain location. So Izuku and his team, they end up jumping through the portal, and that's when they arrive at Marineford in One Piece. But I'll have to explain to you how we got to that point. Then next, we have Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm. Now, this was a series that was definitely hard to write. And the main reason was because I had to decide who got what powers. Now, there were a lot of people suggesting different people from Naruto who should get what powers, and I understand why they chose them. But I'm going to explain to you why I chose the people that I did. I chose them because I wanted it to be balanced. As much as I would love to see all of the Konoha 12 get a power up and do something special, in the end, I just don't really like a series where I overpower the Leaf Village and everyone else is like just falling to the wayside. So here's what I did. I gave 1 Ranger power to a major ninja in every village. Naruto became the Red Ninja Ranger. Kaori from the Hidden Cloud became the Blue Ranger. Temari from the Sand became the Yellow Ranger. Kurasuchi from the Stone, she became the Crimson Ranger. Chojuro from the Mist, he became the Navy Ranger. I have a version of Cam. Now, this is like Cam from Ninja Storm from the original, but this version of Cam is a variant. He is from the Land of Iron. He is Mifune's grandson, the leader of the samurai. You know, because the Green Ninja Storm Ranger is also the Green Samurai Ranger. So he's a samurai. And as for Sasuke, Sasuke is the Black Ninja Storm Ranger. But that's because Orochimaru, he stole a prototype morpher. And he ended up corrupting it. And he was able to create the Black Ninja Ranger. And that's what Sasuke was able to take for himself. Now, I won't go into too much detail about how this story plays out, but just know that this is a all-star Ninja Ranger team made up of different characters from different villages. Because of this team's effort, a lot more of the Jinchuriki were able to survive in this universe, and they were able to achieve world peace a lot quicker than they were originally able to do so. While the Akatsuki were a threat, they were dealt with rather swiftly, forcing Obito's hand to try to lead an all-out assault. However, in the end, Obito was defeated and put in jail, and peace was restored to the ninja world. Zetsu was hunted down by Sasuke and Naruto. Naruto in this universe, he does master the Nine Tails, but because there's no big, large war, instead it's more of a final battle between just the major hitters. Naruto only has 1/2 of the Nine Tails. And Sasuke, in this universe, things played out differently enough to where Sasuke was able to remain on the side of good. He was able to work things out with Itachi, and he was able to avenge his clan by killing Danzo. So Sasuke was able to get the eyes of Itachi, and he has the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. However, when Naruto and Sasuke hunt down Zetsu, they capture him and they bring him back to the Hidden Leaf for interrogation. And here's where they learn the truth. They learn about why the Akatsuki was really formed. And they learn about the real plans of bringing back Kaguya and the threat that she could have posed to the world had he succeeded. Because they learn of all this, Hagoromo, seeing this as a revelation, he ends up causing an event where he brings Zetsu, Naruto, and Sasuke before him. He kills Zetsu to make sure that his mother, Kaguya, can never be revived. And for Naruto and Sasuke, because he can see into the future and he knows that they're going to need all the power that they can get, he bestows upon them Sage of Six Paths power. For Naruto, because he only has one half of Kurama, he basically just amps up Kurama so that the one half that Naruto had basically ends up becoming a whole anyway. So Naruto still has Sage of Six Paths in this story. As for Sasuke, he gifts him with one Rinne Sharingan. So they basically end up getting their power-ups, but that's to lead into the future going down the road. Also, in case this series gets a spin-off going into the Boruto era, then you would have to make some changes. Also, just as a side note, in this universe, Naruto is shipped with Kurasuchi from the Hidden Stone Village. Simply because I really like her character, and I feel like when I write her, I could bring out some different sides of her and change her in a different way. And whenever I do these different stories, I like to switch up the pairings and try to do something that's a little more original. So that's the pairing going into this universe. But then we would go into our sixth story, and that was going to be Jujutsu Kaisen, The Curse of Daishi. Jujutsu Kaisen crossover Power Rangers Jungle Fury. Now for this crossover, I just thought that it kind of made sense, and I was able to play off the Jungle Fury story and the Jujutsu Kaisen story. But in order to explain how this series plays out, I have to go back to the lore's beginning. So in this universe, you have Daishi. You have Daishi, who led the monstrous animal spirits. You have Sukuna, who led the cursed spirits. And then you had the humans that they battled. However, the humans were divided into two sects. There were the Jujutsu sorcerers, and there were the Pai Shui masters. The Jujutsu sorcerers, they fought against cursed spirits. The Pai Shui masters, they fought against the animal spirits. So you could say that the earth has been in a three-way deadlock: cursed spirits, animal spirits, and the humans. Now, the way that the folklore goes is that a woman who was a Pai Shui master and a man who was a Jujutsu sorcerer fell in love and had a child who was able to use cursed energy and had a very powerful animal spirit. As a result, he rose to fight against Sukuna and Daishi in a three-way battle that resulted in the defeat of both Daishi and the defeat of Sukuna, with the two of them being sealed away. Sukuna being sealed by his 20 fingers, and Daishi being sealed the way he was sealed in Jungle Fury. After this, the Pai Shui masters and the Jujutsu sorcerers came together under one roof, and they combined their techniques together. So not only were you capable of having an animal spirit, but you were also capable of using Jujutsu sorcery. Other than that, everything in this universe plays out exactly the same, up to the point where Yuji ends up eating the finger, and he becomes the vessel of Sukuna. But he also has a strong animal spirit, and so he has the spirit of the tiger. You have Megumi Fushiroshi, who has the spirit of the jaguar, and you have Nobara, who has the spirit of the cheetah. You have Gojo, who has the spirit of the wolf. Now, in this universe, there are no Power Rangers per se, but similar to RJ from the original Jungle Fury timeline, Gojo was basically able to get some help building the morphers and tapping into the morphing grid. Now, I'm not going to explain specifically how he did so, mainly because I would have to come up with something that would be way more convoluted than it's worth, so just believe that he was able to do so in this timeline. However, they are not the only Rangers that exist. In the Tokyo school, they use the Jungle Fury powers. This is a representation of how they channel their animal spirits, allowing it to flow out. However, the Kyoto school, they have the Wild Force powers. And I used Wild Force because I didn't want just the Japanese for the Tokyo school in Japan to have one power and Kyoto not to have the other. The Kyoto school is basically the school where Toto comes from. So I gave them Wild Force. And Wild Force is a different representation of how to use your animal spirit. Instead of sending it outward like how Jungle Fury can, they keep it inward and they use it to enhance themselves. So it's kind of like a different flow of how to use their abilities. One lets it unleash and go out, the other one keeps it in. Other than that though, the story of Jujutsu Kaisen basically remains the same, but it changes at a certain point. Jinpei, who Yuji meets while he's training and keeping himself in hiding after everyone believes that he's dead, he ends up being recruited by the cursed spirits, Mahito, and he ends up being tricked. However, Camille, who exists in this universe also, is looking for a vessel for Daishi. She comes across Jinpei, and before he is killed, he is given the choice to become the vessel for Daishi. He chooses to become the vessel for Daishi. As such, Daishi escapes and takes over Jinpei's body. So now we have a bigger problem on our hands, because not only does Sukuna have a vessel, but now Daishi has a vessel. And basically, the three-way deadlock for power has now reformed into the world, because you have Satoru Gojo, the strongest Paichwa Jujutsu sorcerer, you have the vessel for Sukuna, and now you have the vessel for Daishi. Also in this universe, we also have the White Rhino Ranger, who is a close friend of Gojo's, which is Nanami. So I gave Nanami the Rhino power. And also rounding out the Tokyo school, we have Toge, who is the Shark Ranger. We have Panda, who is the Elephant Ranger and has an elephant core. And we have Maki Zenin, who has the power of the bat, which I think is a good play on her power, because she has to use her glasses to see the cursed spirits because she wasn't born with the ability to do so. So I gave her the ability of the bat because she goes in kind of fighting a little blind. So that's basically how the team sets up. Outside of that, the Jujutsu story basically remains the same. Ultimately, Daishi didn't play too big of a role in Season 1, but if I do come back to this series down the line, as we go into Season 2 with the Shibuya arc, then that's where Daishi's presence is really going to be felt. And for those of you who have read the Shibuya arc, you know a lot that goes down. So you add the problems of the animal spirits and Daishi on top of that, then we got some major issues. But anyway, at the end of Season 1, you have the Tokyo School of Rangers all gathered together, and you have the incident when the portal opens up, and it's basically beckoning Rangers to go in there and fight. Yuji, he jumps in there first, followed by Megumi and Nobara, and then Maki, Toge, and Panda follow after them. So that's 6 Rangers gone, but Gojo, because he senses what's kind of going on, he decides to allow it, and he allows his students to go because he knows they'll be back. Also, the main reason he knows they'll be back is because Sukuna is not too happy, because Sukuna is now in another dimension away from his fingers. So he knows that Sukuna is going to keep Yuji alive because Sukuna has to get back to get more fingers to get stronger, because if he dies now, then he'll never be whole and his vessel is already not strong enough. So in the meantime, Gojo has to look after Tokyo while his students are gone. But he does call in a favor. He ends up tracking down Yuta, who has the powers of the Gold Jungle Fury Ranger with the spirit of the dragon. And he basically recruits Yuta to help him watch over the city until his students return. But then, that would carry us into our final story, and that is one that we concluded rather recently. that being One Piece Rangers of the Sea. Now, because this story is so recent, a lot of you pretty much know it, so I'll just give you the highlights of what happened. Basically, our story starts in Sabaody during the events when the Marines attack and the Straw Hats got decimated. Kuma, in this universe, knows of the legendary power of the Pirate Rangers. Now, this version, I am using the Gokaiger series, and I'm rolling it into Power Rangers because I like Gokaiger. Gokaiger, it's pretty much Power Rangers One Piece, so there's no point not to use that version of the lore. But I'm just counting that Gokaiger is connected to Power Rangers. So we're not using Megaforce. We're skipping Megaforce, although I do use Robo Knight. And essentially, because Kuma is a part of the Revolutionaries, and he's working with Dragon, Dragon wants to help Luffy. So he basically gives Kuma the information to give the Straw Hats to send them to different islands where they can find the Ranger power, they can unlock it, and they can use it to go and save Ace at Marineford, who's about to be executed in less than 3 weeks. So the Straw Hats, they're all sent to different islands. One by one, they each manage to get the Morpher along with the Ranger Key, and they transform and they find different ways to get to Marineford. And along the way, they are helped by the various ghosts of the Gokaiger Rangers, along with other Power Rangers and other ghosts from the past who, in spirit, give them the tools that they need to succeed. Luffy is Gokai Red, Zoro is Gokai Blue, Sanji Gokai Green, Nico Robin Gokai Yellow, Nami Gokai Pink, Usopp Gokai Silver, Chopper is Zenkaiger or Gokaiger Gold. You have Frankie, who ends up becoming the Robo Knight, and you have Brook, who gains the power of the Magna Defender. They each gain their powers and they learn a lesson along the way before they eventually arrive at Marineford all together to help Luffy fight to save his brother Ace, along with the Whitebeard Pirates as the war at Marineford takes place. In the midst of battle, they have to fight against the warlords and they have to fight against various powerful Marines. Because of this, Luffy, in a last-ditch effort, calls out desperately for help as he's being jumped by the 3 admirals. Because of his strong emotions and his ties to the Morphing Grid, it basically creates a portal where all of the teams that I had created up till this point all come piling in at the same time. That includes the Konosuba team, who I am now realizing I just forgot to mention. So, to briefly explain, Konosuba was combined with Power Rangers Mystic Force because they have the magical element going on their side. It's not something to take too seriously, it's more of a comedy series than anything else, but it's one that I find just to be a bit funny because, you know, not every story has to be dark and grim. You can have some stories where you can have a laugh. Kazuma is the green Mystic Ranger, Aqua is the blue Mystic Ranger, Megumin is the red Mystic Ranger, Darkness is the yellow Mystic Ranger because she has a bit of a kink fetish, so being shocked by lightning would be up her alley. You have Yun, who is the pink Mystic Ranger, and you have Wiz, who is the white Mystic Ranger. You also have Vanir, who has the powers of Korag, the Wolf Knight, and in the movie, I picked a special choice to become the Gold Ranger, but you'll have to watch that yourself to see what ends up happening. But you have the Konosuba team, the 5 primary Rangers who are there, and as for Wiz, she ended up staying back in the Konosuba universe to take care of some other matters. But the main thing to focus on is that this team up is an all-star classic, seeing different Rangers from different universes all come together to help out a fellow Ranger in time of need. In the end, they are able to save Ace with their combined efforts, but unfortunately Whitebeard still ends up dying, and he has his devil fruit stolen by Blackbeard, who now has the power of Tremor and the power of darkness. However, Ace vows to catch him and kill him in the new world. At the end, all of the Rangers are gathered together and Izuku explains what's going on. Because of this, Luffy and the Straw Hats, they agree to help in any way that they can. So, Izuku makes the call. They end up contacting Trip from Time Force and they explain to him what's going on. Trip explains that Lord Draken is now making his move and he needs to be stopped, and he uses a special beam to teleport all of the Rangers to Time Force HQ, where they can be debriefed on what's going on and what they need to do. Also, in the meantime, Shanks has decided to take Ace under his wing and train him during the time skip so that Ace can be ready when he goes into the new world, because Ace is going to take Whitebeard's place to become an emperor. Now, the way that the time travel thing works essentially with this universe is that when the story is over, everyone's going to be sent back to their respective timelines at the moment that they left to begin with. So, even though time will pass for them in the worlds that they left, it'll be as if they were only gone for a couple of minutes. That way, the Straw Hats, they can go back to their world, they can go through their own time skip and train and get ready for the new world along with their ranger powers, and everyone else can go back to where they started in their stories. If they still have to go on, then they can. But anyway, this is the recap and everything that you need to know as we head into the final part of the Heroes of the Morphing Grid. Similarly to the first recap, you could say that this is the end of Phase 1 in that regard. And honestly, like I said in the previous video, thank you to everyone who supports PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. As always, I cannot do it without you. You make the channel grow, you make the core grow. And I'm being entirely honest when I say this. The reception you guys have had for the Heroes of the Morphing Grid has been phenomenal. It's been more phenomenal, to make the joke. Really. When I started it a year ago, again, I had no idea it was going to get this big. And now that we're approaching the end of all of this time, I just don't know what else to say other than thank you. I mean, really. I'm just a guy who makes stories for a living, and the fact that you guys take the time out of your day to listen, to watch the special opening videos that I make for my stories, to be as invested as you are, it just means everything to me. So really, thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I truly appreciate it. I can't do it without you. You make the channel grow, you make the core grow, and I just hope that I can keep entertaining you guys, not only now, but for everything that is to come. But anyway, later on this week, we are going to be doing our final 2 stories and wrapping up Phase 1. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conclusion of the show. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. And I'm signing off, and I will see you next time. Bye.